Hello everyone, welcome back to Spectator Sports, where we cover sports from a spectator's point of view. I'm your host Sebastian Fonseca. This is episode number 124, and thank you everybody for helping us out to hit our goal of 200 subscribers just before the Christmas holidays. So really appreciate everybody's contributions. But before we get into this week's episode, we're going to recap some major headlines across the NFL and the NBA. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping. If you're new to Spectator Sports and you want to help this channel grow, reach a broader audience, we're going to need your help. Drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. If you want to catch clips from today's episode as well as our past episodes, we got that for you all over here on YouTube and our various playlists as well as on TikTok. And you want to enjoy Spectator Sports from an audio perspective, we got that for you too. Link to the Spotify as well as the YouTube channel and TikTok will be in the description. Let's get into this week's episode. Spectator Sports got a special Christmas present as we hit our year-end goal of 200 subscribers by the end of 2024. So wanted to thank everybody, new subscribers, old subscribers, to help out the views, help this channel reach a broader audience like I've been saying. And just to summarize the accomplishments in 2024, we have more than doubled the amount of subscribers from 2023 in this channel's entire history just in this year alone. I've really figured out how to reach out to more people here on YouTube as well as on TikTok, as on TikTok, we actually went past 230 followers on that platform, and really wanted to say I appreciate everybody's contributions to helping Spectator Sports grow. Let's continue to build something. This year we hit 200. Let's see what 2025 can bring us. Detroit has been in control of the NFC North for the majority of this season, but unfortunately for them, the Vikings have continued to win. This sets up a winner-take-all scenario where the winner could get the NFC's 1 seed and it's only bye week, and the loser has to drop down to the 5th seed. It's kind of weird to think about that a 14-win team could be playing on the road on Super Wildcard weekend. This begs the question that I've been thinking about heading into the final weeks of this year, that should division winners be hosting home playoff games? There's been some rare scenarios, and I think it's been coming up more and more in recent years, that some of these wildcard teams actually have better records than some of these division winners. And I don't think division winners should just be automatically eliminated better than them, but I do think that it is a tiebreaker situation where they get a playoff berth regardless of the other seedings, but they don't get the home playoff game. And I know there's some money involved in it and owners are probably not going to be too keen on it, but if you're just talking about how fair this is, I would submit this to the NFL Rules Committee first thing at the end of the season. Think about this year alone, where the loser of this Vikings-Lions matchup would be 14-3, and they would have to go on the road to play either the Rams, Falcons, or Buccaneers, all of which have had at least double the amount of losses than the Lions or the Vikings. Throughout the majority of this season, we've seen that the body of work between either the Lions and Vikings have been much better than all three of those teams. I think the Bucs are a little bit of a weird scenario because they've had a litany of injuries, but regardless, I think both the Vikings and Lions have been better than all those other teams that they could end up playing on the road this postseason. I think division winners deserve an automatic playoff berth. That is absolutely a fact. But to host a home postseason game, I think, is an extreme disservice to the NFL, its competition, and the fans. Imagine if we re-ranked last year's teams that qualified for the postseason. If we ranked the AFC based on best record, the Texans would be the 7th seed, and the Cleveland Browns would actually be the 4th seed. The Dolphins would be at 5, and the Steelers would be at 6th. In the NFC, it would be different as well, where the Eagles would be the 4th seed, hosting the LA Rams as the 5th seed, and then the Packers would be 6th, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 9-8 would be at 7. And through the years, many people will look and see that maybe these are anomalies, but even in 2022, Tom Brady's Buccaneers got into the postseason at 8-9, and they were routed by the Dallas Cowboys. There are cases where these division winners get their doors blown off right from the jump. It's not even close. And I think that the rare cases that they do end up winning is attributed to them having home field advantage. Many people will harp back to 2011 with a matchup where we saw the 7-9 Seattle Seahawks beat the defending Super Bowl champion New Orleans Saints. And I think the reason why they even had an opportunity to be competitive in that game was because they had played that game in Seattle. If that game was played in New Orleans, if we were to re-rank the 2011 postseason seedings in the NFC, I don't even think the New Orleans Saints would even be a road team. They would probably be hosting, and the Seahawks would probably be on the road getting trounced and bounced out. We wouldn't even hear about the Beastquake. That's really my main argument in this, is that if we are talking about the best teams to make the postseason, we see this in the NBA where division winners isn't a big deal there. They just care about the best 8 teams in each conference. And there's already talks about the NBA maybe adapting it to the overall best 16 teams and forgetting about conference, because in many years, the Eastern Conference in the NBA has been a lot weaker, and we're seeing teams in the Western Conference getting deprived of postseason appearances at a 500 record. I think that does justify one of those NBA teams out of the West to make the Eastern postseason bracket. But getting back to the NFL, I think that division winners deserve a playoff berth, but not a home playoff game. The Steelers seem to be amid a giant collapse. In the last 3 games that they've played good competition, including the Philadelphia Eagles, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Kansas City Chiefs. And at a minimum, I really wanted the Steelers to show me that they are true contenders in the AFC by at least going 1-2. That's not a lot to ask for, because I know the Eagles are a tough matchup and they didn't have George Pickens. They really needed to win. It's the game against the Baltimore Ravens. You're going on the road, you're playing a division rival. If you sweep Baltimore, you basically have the division locked up. But unfortunately for Pittsburgh, things fell apart in the second half. It was a 7-point game. Steelers get the ball back with an opportunity to tie the ball game up, but Russell Wilson throws a bad pick 6 to Marlon Humphrey, who takes it back, and the game's virtually over from there. The Ravens go up by 14 points. They win by the final score of 34-17. While they did have that fourth quarter burst, like I said, this game was right there for the taking, and we have to see that Russell Wilson's play hasn't been the same ever since December really rolled around. We've seen some issues where he's been missing throws, and against the Ravens in particular, it wasn't that great, because in the first half, he was running towards the goal line, had an opportunity to either set them up with a touchdown or, if not, a first and goal opportunity, but he fumbled the ball after taking a hit, and the red zone turnovers, like we've been saying, is one of the biggest cardinal sins in all of football. Ravens take advantage, and Lamar Jackson and the Ravens get the season split against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, this sets up a must-win scenario against the Kansas City Chiefs, the 2-time defending champions, at home this time. After this rough 2-game stretch on the road, you get a home game on Christmas against the Kansas City Chiefs. And yet again, you enter the fourth quarter just down 6. It's 16-10. Steelers offense didn't show up in the fourth quarter as the Kansas City Chiefs dominated the final period, winning by a score of 29-10. The Steelers offense, which has faded in this final stretch, yes, George Pickens has been out, but let's be honest though, there have to be other options out there outside of George Pickens, this talented wide receiver, for the Steelers to generate any type of offense. And in these 3 pivotal contests, the Steelers offense haven't put up more than 17 points. And it's not like the defense hasn't been balling out. I mean, they've generated turnovers. They have been able to get stops against very good offenses. But unfortunately, the Steelers offense hasn't put up their end of the bargain. I just remembered that game against Philadelphia where they forced 2 back-to-back fumbles, and on the first fumble, they didn't even get any points. And after getting a special teams turnover deep in the red zone inside Eagles territory, Steelers go 3-out and have to settle for a Chris Boswell field goal. Talking about Russell Wilson in particular, I don't think he's the main cause for the Steelers' collapse, especially on the offensive struggles, but his play has dipped. I mean, let's just look at it. The turnovers have gone up, the efficiency is down, his yards per pass is not the same as it used to be, and we can't just say that, oh, well, no, there's no George Pickens. Well, Russell Wilson has been in this league for many years, and to be honest, he started off his career without talented wide receivers. It was only the back end of his Seattle career when he got talented wide receivers like a Tyler Lockett or a DK Metcalf, for example. It wasn't until then that he had prolific pass catches. He's been able to make a lot of things happen, and we know that his mobility hasn't been the same since the earlier part of his career, but as a pocket passer, there's been times that Russ has absolutely missed passes, and we saw a lot of those against the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, the interception against the Chiefs was really the backbreaker there and take off an opportunity to score in the red zone. Now you're looking at the Steelers. They stand as the 5th seed, and they look like a team that's on the way out of the NFL playoffs. I mean, they'll get in. They're currently in, but depending on how the seeding works out, my only true belief in the Steelers team of getting any type of playoff success is if they match up against the lowly Houston Texans, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this podcast. But the Steelers overall, if they match up against any team outside of the Houston Texans and play like the Ravens yet again, I think that they'll be one and done, missing out on another postseason opportunity where they failed to win a single game. And this extends a drought that we haven't seen this Pittsburgh Steelers team under Mike Tomlin win a postseason game since 2016. I understand Mike Tomlin will be a Hall of Fame head coach. He's been part of a fantastic program in Pittsburgh, but let's just look at the recent results. I mean, they have been a lot of mediocre type of performances, and you limp into the postseason not looking the greatest, and then you get shellacked in the first round. I mean, I can't remember the last time that the Steelers actually were competitive even in the wild card round. And if they flame out again, I think there might be some changes needed to be made in Pittsburgh for this team that has muddled around in mediocrity for the last better part of a decade. And that's just not the Steelers' mentality. They're better than mediocre. They're all about championships and Lombardi trophies, whereas getting into the postseason and settling for just above average. Lamar Jackson, with his recent play after the bye week, has got himself back in the MVP conversation. Now, in this stretch, he has guided the Ravens to 3 consecutive wins, including wins against the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Houston Texans. And particularly the last 2 teams, while they're in the playoff mix, they haven't been looking great lately, but that's still, you got to play the team that's on your schedule. They've dominated them in back-to-back matchups. To be honest, in the matchup against the Buffalo Bills, he and the Ravens dominated the Buffalo Bills, and that was early on. That's an entirely different Bills team. Those things should be in consideration because Lamar is actually having a better statistical year than any of his previous MVP seasons. I think maybe the 2019 is probably a little bit better if you think about with the rushing stats, but as a passer, Lamar Jackson has evolved, and he is still right there behind Joe Burrow with the league in passing touchdowns. And even in passing yards, he's been on a prolific rate, something we just haven't seen with Lamar Jackson as a passer. The Ravens as a whole beat the Houston Texans by a whopping score of 31-2. And they're just a team that's just so physical. Their defense is looking a lot better. Now, against lesser competition, we'll see how they match up if they have an opportunity to play a team like the Bills and or the Chiefs. But I really do like what Baltimore is doing. I think the bye week was the perfect time for them when they had a chance to reset, catch their breath before they hit this stretch run. And with these recent couple wins being strung together, they are just now 1 win away. They just have to beat the Cleveland Browns at home, and they clinched the AFC North for the second consecutive year. And depending on who they play, I still like their chances on whoever they play. Likely will be between the LA Chargers or the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they have a really good shot. They'll be at home, and they have some experience over teams like the LA Chargers, who just are kind of happy to be here. I think that wouldn't be surprised if they were to shock the Baltimore Ravens, but I do think that Lamar is very hungry for righting the wrongs that happened last year. They had the 1 seed. They had an opportunity to really change the narrative in Baltimore, but this time they will have to face a gauntlet just to get to the Kansas City Chiefs. But I think this could be the year where an AFC title rematch between the Ravens and Chiefs. CJ Stroud is in a sophomore slump. It was just another pathetic showing on Christmas Day against the Baltimore Ravens. He threw an interception and just looked completely out of sorts against this Ravens defense, who is not the same defense as of the past. And while they've made some improvements along the way, I still don't think that this Ravens team is anything extraordinary, at least on the defensive side. To be honest, if you look at what Houston has had to deal with, they've lost a ton offensively. To talk about Stephon Diggs, I mean, his impact and his presence is sorely missed for the Houston Texans. Nico Collins has been in and out of the lineup. And then when you think about Tank Dell, who had some opportunities, and then unfortunately just at the end of the season in the previous game, just like last year where he had a season-ending leg injury, he again hurt his knee. I mean, he basically tore and broke anything that's in your knee joint, and that's very unfortunate. We wish Tank Dell the best in a speedy recovery, because injuries are very frustrating and he's a guy that relies on his speed. So hope that Tank Dell does recover, wish him the very best. But it's still something where we've seen quarterbacks with talented receivers that are depleted, they're missing them due to injury or whatever have you. They're forced themselves out of the team with trades and whatnot, and they elevate their play. And we just haven't seen that with CJ Stroud. And I think that building off of such a good rookie year, I mean, it was a historic rookie year. And the way he looked against a very good Cleveland Browns defense last season in the wild card round, it was a sneak glimpse into say that the Carolina Panthers really messed up the 2023 draft. But with the regression that CJ Stroud has had, and then the slight elevation that we see with Bryce Young in an entirely different circumstance, I think that both teams have gotten stud quarterbacks. It's just that they're still working themselves out of mistakes that young quarterbacks make. Young quarterbacks make a ton of mistakes, and it's not like you're a polished final product right in your first couple years in the league. Let's absolutely exercise some patience. Let's understand that CJ Stroud is a work in progress. I think so many people were ready to anoint him as the best new young quarterback in the league, just like a Jordan Love or whoever have you. But the Texans are still a couple years away from being true AFC title contenders, and I think that based off of their recent performances, their stay in the postseason will be very short. Man, these Bengals, they really don't make life easy on themselves. They had so many opportunities to ice this game against the Denver Broncos and keep their postseason hopes alive, but they keep shooting themselves in the foot. You think about the final sequence, it's a tie ball game, and unfortunately, Chase Brown goes down with a knee injury. You have to take a timeout. You still have some opportunities just to sit on the ball, take an easy field goal, and just either force Denver to use up timeouts or chew up some clock, and then you basically kick the game-winning field goal at the horn. Joe Burrow takes it in himself, but that leaves the Broncos with about 80 seconds or so left on the clock. And the Broncos have been an inconsistent team under Sean Payton and Bo Nix at quarterback, but this was a really thrilling game. Bo Nix really got hot, especially in the second half. He uncorked a missile into the end zone to find Mims for a touchdown, and yet again, he led the Broncos down the field, and in the final seconds on basically a prayer rollout type of play, he found Mims in the end zone over two defenders to catch a game-tying touchdown. At the moment, they were down by one, and they had an opportunity to either kick the extra point or go for two, and you win the game right there. We've seen a lot of opportunities where coaches have elected to kick the extra point and play for overtime. It's hard to say because you have 20/20 hindsight, I understand. A guy like Sean Payton is known to be an aggressive head coach, and I think with an offense is so hot, like the Bengals, you don't want to see that team in overtime. Instead of electing to go for the 2-point conversion, they kick the extra point, they elect for overtime. And the Broncos offense is completely shut down after 2 possessions. And the Bengals are threatening with 3 good possessions, all ending up in Broncos territory. But the second to last possession, they had a 33-yard field goal attempt to win it. And that's the length of an extra point in today's NFL. Unfortunately, they miss. It hits the left upright and game continues. And at that point, you have about 2 minutes and some change left. The Broncos at this point, all they have to do is really get a first down, and a tie gets you into the postseason. Bengals eliminated, don't have to worry about the final week. Instead, they get a little bit too aggressive. Bengals get a last-minute opportunity. They find T. Higgins for a goal-to-go situation, and yet again, Joe Burrow finds T. Higgins for the touchdown, their third link of the day, and the Bengals keep their hopes alive, and they head into the final week, needing some help, and also face a tough test on the road in Pittsburgh, who is still playing for a division title themselves. But this Bengals team is one of the hottest I've ever seen in December. And it's a shame that they need a ton of help just to get in. And miracles absolutely do happen. But I'm not totally confident that the Bengals are going to get the help that they need. We've been on this channel. The Bengals have been snake bitten. They shot themselves in the foot through the entire season. They had opportunities to not be in this bind, but here they are. I do think that they have a good shot. If things fall their way, they will be one of the most dangerous teams to get into the postseason mix. But the question is, will they actually have that opportunity, like I said, because they need a ton of help just to make the dance. Now, the Broncos have a win-and-in situation for the 3rd consecutive week. And fortunately for them, they are going to be playing the Kansas City Chiefs at home, where the Chiefs are likely going to be resting a bunch of their starters. You're going to see Carson Wentz opposite of Bo Nix and not Patrick Mahomes. I think that the Chiefs will be competitive, but I would have some faith that the Broncos starters could beat the Chiefs B team. And I expect the Broncos to finish the deal off. The Dolphins are also still alive too. They would need a win and a Broncos loss to get the last spot in the AFC playoff mix, but we'll see what happens. This will still be a very interesting postseason in the AFC, regardless. Saquon Barkley has eclipsed the 2,000-yard mark to become the 9th member of the 2,000-yard rushing club. This came on an afternoon where the Eagles faithful were in full throat, an opportunity to see their team clinch the NFC East. They were wearing their throwback Kelly Green uniforms, and this was just meant to be. Saquon still needed a ton of rushing yardage to get even to the 2,000-yard mark. He came in entering the day at a hair under 1,840 yards rushing. So that means he needed more than 160 yards to get into the 2,000-yard club. And in the first half, it didn't look that great, but the third and early part of the fourth quarter, Saquon got going and he eventually eclipsed the 2,000-yard mark, like I said, to become the 9th member to join this exclusive running back club. And it's been a phenomenal year for Saquon Barkley in his first year as a Philadelphia Eagles. Looking at how his former team is doing in the Sunday early window slot, they actually won against the Indianapolis Colts. And on paper, that sounds good. It's good for morale. Maybe that saves the head coach's job in Dable. But unfortunately, though, they had the top overall pick coming into that week, and the win now drops them down all the way to 4th. And even on a day where the Giants win, they actually kind of lose. And this win could set them back for many years because they desperately need a quarterback. They don't have the quarterback of the future on their roster. And this is not the best quarterback draft coming up. Expect Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders to go very early in the draft, and I wouldn't be surprised if a team even tries to trade up to get one of these two talented quarterbacks. It's going to be interesting to see what the New York Giants are, because like we've been saying throughout this entire year, when John Mara basically outed himself on Hard Knocks offseason, where he said he would have a hard time sleeping if Saquon was playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, his worst nightmare has come into fruition. Saquon is flourishing with the Eagles, and they've clinched the NFC East while the Giants are in last place in the very same division. Now, we have to see next week if Saquon is going to play in Week 18. He is just a mere 101 yards away from breaking Eric Dickerson's all-time leading rushing record. He has the luxury of the extra game, but if you do think about it, he would need a ton of more carries to match the amount of attempts that Eric Dickerson has. And to be honest, Eric Dickerson broke OJ's record at the time when OJ ran for 2,000 yards in a 14-game season. So he had 2 extra games to get his record. I think 1 extra game isn't that big of a deal, but the risk outweighs the benefit at this point. The Eagles are playing for much more than just records at this point. And if Saquon wants it, I'm sure Nick Sirianni will at least give him a try at it, but it's now involving many other pieces outside of Saquon. The offensive line would need to be there to block for him. Jalen Hurts might need to suit up as well. I just think that's very unnecessary. If there were playoff stakes that mattered here, where the Eagles could be in play for the 1 seed, but they're locked into the 2 seed. They can't go higher and they can't go lower. At this point, rest up, get ready for the postseason, take advantage of a free bye week, and then prepare for your wild card opponent in 2 weeks. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you so much for everybody tuning in. Thank you again for helping us get to 200 subscribers. I hope everyone has had a Merry Christmas and has a Happy New Year. Shout out to Joy for editing this podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Take care, everybody.